I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Ford Fiesta ST. So this is going to be a bit of a good one because if you've been a subscriber for a while, you'll know that hot hatches are one of my absolute favorite genres of cars, and this one, many people think, is the best hot hatch of all, or at least a lot of people thought that about the last one. This is the first time the new ST has been available to drive on Australian roads. It arrives in the country this week, which is a big deal for people who love these small pocket rockets. The new Fiesta ST arrives in the market to compete head-on with the Volkswagen Polo GTI, a car that we also like here on Chasing Cars, but is quite mature and grown up. The Fiesta ST, on the other hand, has always been more raw, a bit more alive, maybe a little bit more interesting. So in today's video, we're going to find out if that's still the case with the new ST that uses a really boosty 1.5 litre 3-cylinder engine under this bonnet. Now I reckon they look pretty good, this new shape, and they look good in red, but you'll notice that it's a 5-door, and that's because in Australia you can only get the 5-door for the Fiesta ST. And the ST is the only Fiesta you can get in Australia. So I reckon this is really one for the fans, isn't it? This is a pretty niche vehicle. This category is already relatively narrow in terms of people who buy in it. So, and the other thing is that the Fiesta ST continues to be manual only. So it makes me wonder, why is it 5 doors? I reckon a 3-door probably would have been a better fit for something relatively niche, but you can let me know what you think below the video. Either way, 5-door, 3-door, the same front interior is a really good place to be. Now, it's relatively tight and compact, which is a great thing in a small hot hatch, and it stands in direct contrast to the Polo GTI, which feels quite spacious and grown up inside. The Ford, by contrast, is actually quite premium, as we'll come to in a second, but it feels really tight. It's a proper little driver's car, this one, and that starts with the seats. These Recaro buckets, they are standard, just like everything else you see in this car. This one is the $31,990 car, which is a little bit cheaper than a Polo GTI, and it's a really generous spec. Got this lovely leather steering wheel with white stitching here, big touchscreen here in the center with Ford's sync system that's relatively easy to use, driven by these large touch targets there with some hard buttons down here, including one to completely turn off the screen, which I really like in a hot hatch. They look forward at clear and crisp analog gauges with a little digital screen, certainly not as immersive or, you know, wow factor as the Polo GTI's active info display, but there's nothing wrong with them. They suit the car pretty well. In terms of materials, you've got lots of soft touch up here on the dash, hard doors, hard down here. That said, this is a budget performance car, so that really isn't what it's all about. We do have heated seats though, and we have Bang & Olufsen audio, which is particularly impressive as standard equipment. The only option, premium paint or a panoramic sunroof. In terms of practicality, it's good. We got decent sized cup holders, little bin here that goes quite deep, 2 USB ports up front, and door bins that can take a big water bottle. So there are places to stash your clutter, and it really feels tight, compact, and focused. I really, really like it. Let's check out that little back seat next. Because if it's gonna be a 5-door, well, at least that means it's got a good accessible second row. But as you can see, it's not particularly big or capacious in here. For myself, it's 6 foot. I've got, you know, just enough headroom, so headroom's no problem. My legs are jammed up against my own seat in front of me here, but toe room itself is actually okay. There is a 5th seat and a 5th seat belt here in the middle, so at a pinch, you could get 5 people into the Fiesta ST, but this is really a car for couples and maybe a pet or just occasional use of these back seats. That's really what it's all about, isn't it? However, a hot hatch is such a great car because it does actually offer you that practicality. And you find that around the back here, which is quite minimal, you know, reasonably attractive, just ST badging and little twin outlets there. Open up the boot, manual tailgate, absolutely nothing wrong with that, nice and light. And you see that it actually has a decently spacious boot. Not quite as big as the Polo. It's a bit deeper, which means you do have to pull your suitcases up and out. But in terms of getting a couple of medium cases in there or soft bags, that's going to be absolutely no problem. So given the Fiesta ST covers all of those basics and appears to be quite a lot of car for $31,990, let's crack on to the most important part, and that's how this hot hatch drives. Join me for that. So, what's the new Fiesta ST like to drive then? Well, pretty freaking good, as we'll find out in just a minute. Before Though we should remind ourselves about what the big changes are under the bonnet, because that's a pretty considerable difference over the previous Fiesta ST that was a real cult favorite in the small hot hatch class, and for good reason. It was an incredibly talented vehicle with a great chassis and, you know, a good motor, a 1.6 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol, which is pretty par for the course among hot hatches really, and it was a 134 kilowatt, 240 Newton meter output motor that certainly got the job done. But when it came time to planning this new Fiesta ST, Ford knew that they wanted to put their real pride and joy of small engines into it, the 1.5 litre turbocharged 3-cylinder. And certainly don't mistake this for cost-cutting, downsizing. Instead, this engine has real sparkle and lends a ton of character to the new Fiesta ST. So it's the EcoBoost triple, producing 147 kilowatts of power and 290 Newton meters of torque. So we're up in terms of both power and torque. Twist is actually a significant increase, 20% more torque, and that is a significant characteristic that you find in this car. Frankly, the Fiesta ST almost feels grown up in the engine department in that it's quite happy to be short shifted now, because it just has so much torque available from low revs, and honestly that's how it feels fastest. It doesn't reward in terms of speed by winding it all the way out, but it does reward in terms of noise, because this thing has a really characterful little 3-cylinder engine. That offbeat warble sounds great, sounds mechanical, sounds alive. I really, really like it. The only problem is it's just not loud enough. The exhaust is too subtle, stock. Of course you can change that sort of thing aftermarket really easily, and if I was buying the car I would have to do that, because unfortunately at high speeds, when you're really wringing the neck of the ST, it just gets drowned out by the road noise from the Michelin Pilot Supersport rubber and just the general, relative lack of sound insulation. So it becomes a little difficult to hear the engine, but when you can hear it, it's awesome. It's also a brilliant match for the 6-speed manual gearbox that is the only transmission choice in this car, like a true hot hatch really. You get this, the ergonomics of it are not the best, but you get this little short shifter down here, nice metal top and leather surround. It feels great in the hand, really snickety, almost has that sort of rifle bolt action of a Mazda MX-5 almost, but it's really easy to roll along. It's a really easy manual. In fact, you'd be able to have this as a first car. It'd be a really nice first car, but you'd be able to learn manual on this so nice and easily, because the clutch is great. There's a really natural amount of travel in the clutch before the friction point. It's not too heavy, not too light. In fact, all the control surfaces feel in harmony in the Fiesta ST, which is one of the reasons why it's such a joyful, happy driver's car. A car that makes you want to drive it sportily, makes you want to seek out a back road on your way home like I'm doing right now. It just rewards you for doing so. And that brings me on to the really chatty, communicative chassis. Thankfully, given the chassis of the previous Fiesta ST was such a standout, Ford haven't failed to fill those enormous shoes here. You feel so in touch with what's happening beneath you, and it's so, multi-level. There's really good grip from the front end. Those Michelins bite hard. There's not a huge amount of weight to have to stick to the road, only 1,217 kilos, which makes it genuinely light. That engine sounds so good. So it can be sticky and clinical and surgical if you want it to be, but all you have to do is just dab the brakes or just even lift off the throttle, and you can adjust your line so nicely. That back just comes around so easily. It's an absolutely classic hot hatch in that way, and you feel so in touch here in the driver's seat, in a great seat, sitting low in the car, holding onto a nice, comfortable, sporty feeling steering wheel that isn't too, stupid. Like, there's no Alcantara on it. It's just a nice leather wheel, good size, not too small, not too big. Now the ride, I won't lie to you, and I'm sure you can tell from the footage, it's firm, definitely. But you want that in a hot hatch. You know, if you're after comfort and refinement, there are many other cars that Ford or others can sell you to do the job and water it down. But the Fiesta ST is still a proper, pretty raw hot hatch that biases athleticism over comfort every single time, and I'm so glad that it does. Oh man, that chassis adjustability, it's so wonderful. You'd never get bored of this car, I don't think. Back to that ride. At the rear, it's pretty stiff. Mid-corner bumps, you absolutely know about them, but it's just to the point where if it got any stiffer, it'd be throwing you off course. It's incredibly well judged. It's a good suspension tune, just single stage dampers, nothing wrong with that. Now the 18-inch wheels, they're pretty big, not a huge amount of sidewall, 205/40 tires on this thing. You know, maybe downsizing to a 17 would be even better, but I'm fine with it as it is. And in terms of safety, well, we have lane keep assist that works pretty well. We have normal cruise control, we've got AEB and forward collision warning, so you've got a few things there to help you out. And it's quite a solid feeling little car, but ultimately this is all about driving fun, and it's exactly what the Fiesta ST delivers. So those are our detailed impressions of the new Ford Fiesta ST, and what a great hot hatch this is. We love it. The new Fiesta ST feels dialed in, it feels alive. It's a fun little car where you don't have to be doing massively law-breaking speeds in order to have fun, because it is so communicative, it's so chatty, it's such a joy to drive. The fact that it's a really complete car with a generous specification and quite a good dollop of practicality just helps to get anyone who is head before heart over the line. But ultimately, this is a car you buy with your heart because it makes you feel the joy of driving again, and that is the great thing about a sports car like this. So let me know what you think below the video about the Fiesta ST, any comments or requests, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.